Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Oblong Online event for Michael Sadowski's new memoir, Men I've Never Been, presented in partnership with Bard Written Arts. My name is Leif Cantrell, and I am Oblong's Digital and Events Manager, and I will be your tech host this evening. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes. There's a Buy the Book button down in the bottom middle of your screen. If you click that, it'll lead you to signed copies of Michael's new book. And there's also an Ask a Question button that is to the right of the Buy the Book button. At any point during tonight's event, please feel free to ask a question. We love your questions, and our authors will get to them at the end of the event. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's authors. Michael Sadowski is the author of the acclaimed books In a Queer Voice, Safe is Not Enough, and Adolescence at School. He is an administrator and professor at Bard College. In his new memoir, Men I've Never Been, he recounts his odyssey as a boy who shuns his own identity and ultimately his sexual orientation in order to become who he thinks he's supposed to be. In conversation with Michael this evening is Domenica Ruta. She is the author of the celebrated New York Times bestselling memoir, With or Without You, and the novel Last Day. Her short fiction has appeared in the Boston Review, the Indiana Review, and Epoch. She teaches fiction at Bard Early College in the Hudson Valley. Domenica, welcome. I will now pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Leif, and thank you, Oblong Books. It's one of my favorite bookstores in New York. I'm sad we can't be there right now. It's such a sweet, sweet spot. But thank you for hosting us. I'm so excited to be here tonight to introduce and interview Michael Sadowski. I first met Michael and learned about his writing in 2014, which seems a long time ago. And I got the first pages of what would eventually become this gorgeous book that we're here to celebrate tonight. And if that one semester at the Gotham Writers Workshop was all I had ever heard of Michael and his book, I would never have forgotten his stories and his voice. They were so powerful, even in their very first draft. And luckily for me, Michael kept in touch over the years, and I got to watch this book grow and develop and become the beautiful thing that it is today. And I'm really excited to celebrate it tonight. Michael, welcome. So good to see you. Would you like to start the evening by reading an excerpt?
Sure. But first, I want to thank you, Domenica, both for being here tonight and for doing this with me, and also just for everything over the last 7 years that we've known one another. It's really true that this book started in Domenica's workshop in 2014. There were 3 people teaching Memoir 1, and I looked at all of their books and I said, I've got to work with Domenica. I have a feeling she's going to get my voice. And it's just really been amazing the way you have sort of worked with me through the whole process, from the first 15-page booth submission to this book. So, and now being here. So it's just amazing. And I just can't thank you enough. Leif and everybody else at Oblong, thank you so much for making this evening possible. It's really wonderful to do this in my hometown bookstore. And again, as Domenica said, it would be great if we could actually be in the bookstore, but this allows so many people from so many parts of my life and so many parts of the country to be here. So I'm really grateful for that. So thanks to everybody. And thanks to everybody for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight to come and listen to parts of Men I've Never Been. So my first reading is gonna be from the prologue. And the main part of the book is divided into 3 sections that are called Noise, Silence, and Voices. And the prologue I call Before, because it's before all the noise and all the silence and all the voices. So this is from the prologue, which is called The Professor. Before all the times I failed at being a man, I succeeded at being a professor, or at least that's what my father said. In my second earliest memory, he and I are on a mystery drive in his sky blue Galaxy 500. It's July or maybe August, 1966, before most cars had air conditioning. The windows are wide open and a sickly sweet medicinal odor wafts in with the summer heat. Peeking over the dashboard, I can see the looming stacks of a chemical factory churning out plumes of pink and silver smoke. Then we pull into a gravel parking lot, a cloud of gray dust kicking up under our wheels. Where are we? My father's only answer, a wide, toothy grin. With no seatbelt to undo, I tumble easily out of the passenger seat, and we walk toward a flat-roofed, one-story structure identified only by a black, hand-painted road sign I can more or less sound out as Club Royale. As I would later find out, Club Royale was one of the many places my father frequented that my mother wouldn't dignify with the word bar. To her, places of this ilk were beer joints, dumps she wouldn't be caught dead in under any circumstances. The inside of Club Royale is dark, impenetrable to my 4-year-old eyes, and it smells like that combination of stale beer, cork, and old tobacco smoke that permeates dive bars and low-end fraternity houses everywhere. Right away, it's clear that my father has a following here. From the moment we walk in, people start waving and calling out, "John this and John that," which seems strange to me. I always heard people call my father Yash, a Polish nickname for my immigrant grandmother that stuck with the rest of the family. But here he's John, and everybody loves him. That seems a little strange to me too. "Whoa, John, haven't seen you here in a while. How you been?" After acknowledging the greetings of his admirers, Yash sits me up on a bar stool and grabs a copy of the Daily News, a working-class New York tabloid that probably could have been found in every other beer joint in Central Jersey. He holds it up high so that the widest possible audience can see it. Hey, look it, Yash shouts, trying to capture the attention of the entire room. Then he barks, "Michael!" He sounds like he's furious, but I've heard this tone before, so I know what he's up to. "What's it say on that paper?" Falling right into my father's trap, some incredulous barfly pipes up, "That little kid? He can't read that." "Wanna bet?" Then another bark from Yash, this one even louder and angrier sounding than the first. "Michael, what's it say?" Slowly sounding out the headlines in block letters that are a trademark of the Daily News front page to this day, I intone haltingly, but mostly accurately, headlines like, "The Blackout, Nobody Digs Power Flop," "3 Slain, Bomb Rips Saigon." This being near the height of the Vietnam War, the headlines often included the names of places and political figures I stumble on. But do my father's cronies at Club Royale know the difference? And even if some do, sounding out Saigon for Saigon is still pretty good for a kid who's not even in preschool. "John, I'm going to buy you a drink," says one new believer, then another. Yash opens up the paper, and the game continues with page 4, page 7, the back page sports news. The more headlines I read, the more beer and whiskey my father gets for free. "What'll you have, John?" "Shot and a beer," over and over. I probably get free Cokes out of the bets too. I don't remember, though many decades later, I can recall quite clearly the location of the men's room at Club Royale, so I must have been taking in a fair amount of liquid myself. After an hour or two, my father and I walk out of Club Royale and back into the hot summer sun. The chemical odor from across the highway, now tinged with the sweet smell of victory. Then we spin out of the gravel parking lot and drive home, leaving only wonderment and a cloud of gray dust behind us. My father loved the Club Royale story and retold it on many occasions, prophetically referring to me in it as the professor whenever he did. Always a man of stock tales and signature catchphrases, Yash incorporated the line, "John, I'm going to buy you a drink," into his regular repertoire. And whenever I heard it, I swelled with pride, knowing I was exactly the boy my father wanted me to be.
Thank you. Oh, I love that story so much. It's so powerful. And I can see why you would hold on to it as one of the most powerful, second earliest memory of your life, one of the most powerful memories of your life. From reading this book, I think it's safe to say that growing up as a queer young boy in working class suburbs of New Jersey in the 60s and 70s was not an ideal experience, not an ideal environment to blossom and develop. And you write this book and it's filled with a diverse array of memories, really powerful ones. What parts of your formative years do you still find yourself holding on to, both the good and the bad? What are the memories and the moments that you cherish still? And what are the things that you're like still going over in therapy years later?
Yeah, I mean, I call the prologue before, again, because it's before all the noise and the voices in my head and the silences. So I think the thing that I hold on to are those moments, and those moments with my family. I think if I had to say what the overall arc of the story was, it's about how toxic masculinity and homophobia sort of cost us our relationships, our close relationships with the people we love. And a lot of the story in the book, which goes from the time I'm 4 until the time I'm 29, is about that separation. It's about that loss. And the thing that I hold on to from back then is how we all came together again. I'm one of 8 siblings. I'm the 7th of 8 siblings. And we're all close and we all speak to one another and we all love one another. But that was a long road. And if you read the book, you'll see we all went through a lot with my parents and with one another. So I would say that the thing that I hold on to from the past are those relationships with my family that, I'm so lucky to have still in my life. The bad thing that I hold on to is the noise, noise inside my head, that as much as you grow up and you think about, you understand that you have accomplished things and you're a valuable person. And, we've made so much progress in this country around queer issues. That voice, that noise that's inside your head from all those messages you got when you were younger, it finds a way of finding you now I wouldn't say when you least expect it, but small moments can bring it out again. And that's the thing that I carry with me. And I don't think that I'm special or unique in that way. I think that, I think we all do that, whether it's, things that we were silenced for being queer when we were younger, or for not living up to certain standards of masculinity, or whatever it was. But I think that's what I hold on to.
I'm so glad that noise didn't stop you from telling these stories. Because I think for some people that it could, and it didn't for you. And I think that is in and of itself something so powerful, and that these stories have come out and are so rich and beautiful and entertaining. Speaking of your family, it's hard to have a writer in the family. I know this from experience. It's hard to be the writer in the family. I know that from experience too. How did you reconcile which stories to tell and which stories to leave out because maybe they weren't yours?
Yeah, I mean, I questioned this a lot at the beginning of the process. And I remember, Domenica, in the workshop, you said, and I don't think it was to me, but it was someone else, but it really stuck with me. Because they were saying, well, I don't feel I can tell this because, people in my family might be upset. And you said, don't let that block you. You can always go back later if you feel like you need to change things, but just write it now. And that really stuck with me. So I just kind of, put the pedal to the metal and just, tried to move as without fear as I could. And, I think I always had that question though, like what right do I have to tell this story? And I think I came to the conclusion that I have the right to, and it's going to sound like a cliche, but I have the right to tell the story because it's my story. And I tell it, not even really so much for myself, but I tell it for that person who might read it and it might mean something to them. It might think, oh, this speaks to something that I experienced. So I kind of felt almost an obligation to tell my story, because I think it's not just my story. I think it's a lot of people's stories. And it's a kind of story that we don't hear, I think, enough of, about masculinity and about growing up gay and about being, just feeling like you have to be somebody that you're not. So the part where I felt like maybe I had to draw a line was I didn't feel it was my place to tell someone's story that I didn't feel it was my place to interpret someone's story other than in how it affected my life. So I felt like I couldn't tell the story of me without telling the story of my parents or my experience of my parents. But I didn't presume, I don't think, to interpret their life for them. I interpreted it as I experienced it. I don't know, as a memoirist, how you struggled. I don't know. Did you ever struggle with this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I'm gonna use that, and I will give you credit for it, that you have the right to tell the story, but not to interpret other people's stories. I think that distinction is one of real intelligence and compassion, that you can lay bare what happened and your experience of it, but you're not going to, prescribe any kind of pathology onto it or whatever. You're going to let these people have the dignity of their own lives. And I think that's brilliant. And I think it's really compassionate. And I struggled with this too. Anne Lamott famously says, if the people in your life didn't want you to write about them, they should have been nicer. And it's, of course, much more complicated than that. It's not about nice and not nice, as you know. But I ended up cutting a lot of things from my earlier drafts. And I think the book is better for it. Things that weren't mine to tell, that were in that first Fearless draft. And then at the end, they didn't need to be there, for both emotional, but also just aesthetic reasons. And so that actually really helped me make the cuts I needed to. I really love the characters of Yash and Sophie, who are your parents. The way you render them has such compassion and complexity. They are so real on the page. I feel like hearing you do the reading and you do Yash's voice, I'm like, that's what I hear. That's what I hear in my head when I read this book. I was wondering if you could read a little bit more from the book, some scenes that feature them. Sure.
Yeah. I remember in one of our early drafts, you said, I need to see your mother more. And this actually features my father a little bit more. But I remember that was one thing that you really pushed me to do, was to create both of them as complex characters.
Yeah.
Without judgment, but just like rich people who had lives. So I'm going to share from a little bit later on. This is my later years of elementary school. And my father, at this point, is not taking me to bars anymore. He's kind of going on his own. He and my parents, and he's also working a night shift. So I don't really see my father during the week. And when he does come home, it's midnight. He's probably stopped somewhere for something to drink. And I hear my parents fighting in the next room. So this is, however, a glimpse of my father when he was home, which is on the weekends. So the only memories I have of seeing, as opposed to just hearing my father during my later elementary school years, take place on weekends. On a quiet Saturday evening, when we were already in our pajamas, ready to settle in for a night of All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore, and the Carol Burnett Show, Yash would suddenly swing open the back metal storm door after a few hours at a beer joint. "Yous look like a bunch of girls," he proclaimed upon getting his first good look at my brothers and me for the week. "That's it. Yous are going to get haircuts." This out-of-the-blue announcement of haircut night would send the three of us scrambling to all hidden corners of the house while Yash went searching for his wall amateur barber kit. I didn't think my hair looked any longer than that of Greg Brady or Keith Partridge, the cool teenagers on TV I wanted to be, but Yash's charge still stung. "Leave him alone, Jesus Christ," my mother would yell from the next room, her words and tone suggesting she'd put a stop to the whole thing, but her fixed position in front of the newlywed game indicating otherwise. Eventually, my father would nab each of us by the pajama collar from whatever hiding place we'd managed to crouch in, and armed with his haircut weaponry, plunk us into the raised stool he placed in the middle of the kitchen. He'd chomp out wonky styles that required Sophie to do extensive Monday morning doctoring with Vitalis or Dippity-Doo just to make sure we didn't go to school looking like absolute freaks. If any day around the house was Daddy Day, it was Sunday. On Sundays, Yash would often occupy my usual spot on the geometric print sofa and sit all afternoon drinking one Schaefer after another and watching old movies. He loved the black and white Westerns they showed on Channel 5 and tried to get Benny and me interested in them, time after time. Later on Sunday afternoons, if Yash's Western was over and it wasn't time for supper yet, he would play records on the wood grain console stereo, which sat on the opposite end of our living room from the wood grain console TV. Yash's album collection was made up almost exclusively of male crooners. He He had all the big ones like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby, but he also had a soft spot for B-listers like Jerry Vale and Vaughn Monroe, and he bought their records too. After a few more beers, he'd start to sing along. Yash could carry a tune well enough, though his droopy eyes and slurred consonants conjured Dean Martin more than the Frank Sinatra he fancied himself to be. Just like his westerns, we kids hated my father's music. We called it farty, as in sung by a bunch of old farts, and couldn't wait until he fell asleep from too many beers so that we could replace it with a Jackson 5 album. If Yash stayed awake long enough, at some point in the afternoon, he'd get to his favorite ballad, a song in waltz time called Fascination that Nat King Cole sang gorgeously, though at the time I just wrote it off as another one of my father's farty favorites. When Yash played Fascination, or once he scratched the record beyond usability, and then sang it a cappella, it was dance time. Cajoling my brothers and me to place our feet on top of his, Yash would drag us around the living room in a clunky Papa's waltz while he mimicked Nat's buttery baritone. It was fascination, I know. Fascination had been Mommy and Daddy's song, he would tell us, as he choppily moved us across his imaginary dance floor, barely able to maintain his own balance, let alone that of the 5, 10, or 12-year-old boy standing atop his paint-splotched work shoes. Meanwhile, Sophie cooked, took a nap, paid bills, did anything else in another room to put distance between herself and the dancing she wanted no part of. Desperate for confirmation that my parents had once been a normal, loving couple like the ones I saw on TV, I asked my mother if what Daddy said was true, if Fascination had really been their song. The first time I asked, Sophie waved off the question with a dismissive gesture and didn't even look up from her checkbook or the laundry or whatever she was doing, the top of her graying head my only response. But I really wanted to know, so I kept asking. Finally, she gave me an answer, probably just to get me to stop with the questions already, and said she didn't remember.
So powerful. Amazing. Thank you. What do you think Yash and Sophie, if they could have seen this book with Sadowsky on the cover, on the spine, what do you think they would have said?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think my father was the kind of guy who, when I brought my report card home, then I'd have to bring it back to school the next day with a signature on it. And I'd need to bring it back and it was gone. And I'd say, where's my report card? And he'd say, where was my report card today? Oh, I took it to work. I wanted to show the guys. So whenever one of his kids had done something that, was noteworthy, he wanted to brag about it to anybody who would listen. So I think he would, be taking this around, showing the name, at the bottom. He was also really sentimental. So he probably would have liked some of the old stories in it. There would probably be parts he would not particularly like remembering. But again, when you have to tell the whole story, you have to tell the whole story. I tell the whole story about myself. I tell the whole story about everybody. So I don't know if he would have read the whole book. So I could have maybe just redacted it and just shown him the parts that he would have wanted to see. I don't really know what my mother would have thought. I mean, I don't want to say too much about what happens in the story, but she's just kind of an enigma to me. So it's really hard to know. Yeah. My father was, hard on his sleeve. You knew exactly where you stood.
Yeah.
But my mother was complex.
Yeah. And that's in the book. I think that, I could see, I like to think of Yash totally getting a free beer out of this. But then Sophie maybe reading it quietly in a room and no one ever seeing her reading it and no one ever even knowing that she read it. But that's the, what I envision.
Right. She would not, right. She
would read it. She would read it quietly. No one would see it being read. You would never know what happened, but I think she would have read every word. This book is about so many things and it's, what it covers and so powerfully. But one of the things I found really interesting is how our educational experiences can be as profound an effect on us and who we become as our families are in our shaping who we become. Can you read a little bit about what it was like for you in school?
Yes. There are a lot of school stories in here, but the one I'm going to share is from 5th grade. So I have a chapter in the book called Athlete, because every chapter is sort of like a trope or an image of masculinity that I felt like I failed to live up to. So that's the title, and I've never been. So in Athlete, I fail at, or I just never really even get started with things like Pop Warner football. I have that idea for 2 minutes. Little League baseball, gym class was a total fiasco. I mean, just starting with not getting picked, but also like completely messing up every team I was ever on. But the one thing that I succeeded at was when I was in 3rd grade, we had homeroom running races. And excuse me, at that age, I was a tall kid. So I was like 3rd in the class generally at these races. So I was convinced that was the way I was gonna make my mark. So in 5th grade, we had this big thing called field day. Lots of schools have them. You probably know what it is. But this was where I was convinced that I was going to be the king of field day. So then this is what happened at field day. Field day was the biggest event of the year at Vanderveer Elementary, an Olympics-like tournament in which every 5th grade class competed to determine which would be crowned the best. Here at last, I would parlay my past success as a sprinter into a final blazing victory. I'd show everybody, especially the boys who'd rolled their eyes at me and muttered homo when I screwed up in gym class, that I'd become the fastest kid in school. I'd leave them all in a cloud of bewildered, awestruck dust. Preparations for field day began with qualifying heats led by Mrs. Finch, our gym teacher, in the early spring. As the qualifier for each big race, the 50-yard dash, the 100-yard dash, approached, I told myself it would be my event, the one that tapped into my specific strengths as a runner. But after enough of these trials, I learned that a lot of kids had caught up to me height-wise, and more importantly, speed-wise, in the last 2 years. I didn't qualify for any of the big races. My fantasy of breaking the tape to the cheers of my classmates was not to be, and I was relegated to the broad jump, probably the biggest who cares competition of the day. Everybody knew that the kids assigned to the broad jump weren't really the best jumpers. They were just the kids Mrs. Finch didn't know what else to do with. As field day approached, Mrs. Finch tried to drum up excitement like a 60-year-old cheerleader who didn't know any good cheers. 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? 5th graders. Overly tanned, leather-skinned, and always smelling of the last cigarette she'd smoked, I didn't like Mrs. Finch, and my lousy team placement on the broad jump did little to improve my opinion of her. So maybe it was passive aggressiveness, or maybe it was just preteen forgetfulness. But when the sunny June Friday, momentously marked on the school calendar as field day, finally arrived, I made a colossal error. Instead of the sneakers that were required every day we had gym, let alone at a special event like field day, I wore brown, hard-soled leather shoes to school. And because we weren't allowed to go home for lunch that day, we would eat in our classrooms and then head to the playground right afterward, I couldn't go home and change. The best I could hope for was that nobody would look down at my feet all day. "You don't have sneakers on," whispered Rudy Francino within the first 5 minutes of school, moon-faced as if it were the biggest scandal ever to have hit Vanderveer. "Mrs. Finch is going to yell at you. She might not even let you do field day." "Yes, she will," I assured Rudy, while I panicked that here it was, not even 9 a.m., and somebody had already noticed my shoes. "I'm in the broad jump. I can jump even further in these. You'll see." After lunch, we filed down to the playground and gathered up with all the other 5th grade classes. Mrs. Finch ordered us to line up by class so that she could walk back and forth, clipboard in hand, and inspect the troops. Strategically, I positioned my feet behind those of Brad Rosenthal, who spent 13 years next to me in alphabetical order, hoping that my recently shined lace-up Oxfords could escape Mrs. Finch's gaze. When she got to our end of the line, she looked straight down and stopped dead in her tracks. "Michael, where are your sneakers?" "I'm doing the broad jump, so I thought I could wear shoes today." "No, you may not. Now you just step right over there." She was pointing to an area in the middle of the playground, far from where the whole rest of the 5th grade was standing. "You cannot participate in field day if you're not wearing sneakers." Not looking at any of the other kids, I stepped out of the line, clip-clopped toward the region of social Siberia where Mrs. Finch had ordered me to go. After a minute or two getting everyone dispatched for warm-ups, she left the group to come and deal with me. "Now, why don't you have your sneakers?" she asked, in a sigh that reminded me a little bit of my mother's. "I don't know," I mumbled, staring at the ground. I just forgot them. At a temporary loss for words, Mrs. Finch just looked at the sky. Then, as if it came to her in a revelation from above, she found the perfect parting shot. "You forgot your sneakers on field day?" she brayed, staring me right in the eyes. And then, with a low, slow sneer of disgust, she said, "What are you? Some kind of a sissy? You must be." Mrs. Finch let her eyes and her words bore into me for a few more endless seeming seconds. Then, finally done with me, she did a 180 on her kids and turned away. She marched back to kick off the festivities and left me, the field day exile, in the middle of the playground. As I watched her go, I stood stunned for a minute or two. Then I walked over to a high metal stool someone had left alongside the building. I sat down and felt the weight of my heavy leather shoes pulling down on my feet, which didn't quite touch the ground. Soon I heard the faint screech of Mrs. Finch's whistle from the other side of the playground. Field day was starting not 50 yards away, on the grassy field across the asphalt from where I sat. But the longer I sat there, the more it all just receded into the distance. The sprint, the broad jump, the kids, now part of a world from which I felt completely separate. I was deep inside myself now, Mrs. Finch's words booming over and over in a now familiar echo that filled my head, my chest, my entire body. Right around the corner from the row of bushes where Sheila Feldman had branded me a sissy in first grade, Mrs. Finch had issued the final verdict. 5 years of elementary school, of efforts to cut that word and everything it meant out from inside me, had come down to this. At some point, it felt like hours, but was probably only about 45 minutes. The bell rang. Field day was over. I have no idea who won.
I hate her so much. I know that's not the political response to.
I think she's got it coming.
Yeah, no, the damage that teachers can do to the children in their classes. It's so powerful. How do you think things have changed in schools and education for kids today? Or have they changed, or have they changed enough?
I think they've changed, but they haven't changed enough. Certainly, high schools have gay straight alliances. And I would like to think that a teacher could not get away with that in very many places now. I think there are probably some places where they could.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere in this country, somewhere in the state, probably they could. But I think that generally there's still that shame, there's still that silence that kids live through that is really, really hard to, even if there's visibility in the media and there's, visibility in, there's not really visibility in school curriculum, and that's another problem. I mean, kids, 80% or something like 80% of kids say they don't study anything LGBTQ related, all of K-12.
Right.
So that's still really problematic. I think peers are more tolerant. I think adults still have a long way to go. So I think it's better, but I still think that there's and I see this in things that I hear undergrads in my classes say, or the students that we have at Bard Early College. We teach writing, and some of the pieces they write, I taught memoir last semester, and those sort of codes about what it means to be a boy or what it means to be a woman are still really strong and damaging.
Yeah. I am constantly blown away by my students at Bard Early College and just how they stand up for each other in terms of, just gender identity and sexuality, and just what they will not tolerate anything unkind in that department. And it's so healing for me to witness on this end of it, but I agree that the kids are all right. The grown-ups could do better. And it is a privilege of where you live, because there are some states where probably both are really, really toxic. Yeah. It's funny for somebody who was so silenced. It's not funny, actually. I think it's poignant and it's powerful that for somebody who was so silenced, whose voice was shut down, that at a certain point, acting in the theater became a huge part of who you are. It became, it was your field of study in college.
Right.
And it was, you know, it was so interesting to see this character in this book finding a voice in this way. What did the experience of being an actor have to teach you about writing? What do actors have to teach writers? Was there a connection there for you?
Well, there's certainly things that I learned as an actor and as doing theater in general that I think I use in my writing. Some acting training sort of teaches you about like the moment before, the idea of like before you go into a scene, what did your character experience right before that? And one of the things that I always found really helpful to create was like what I would call a movie in my head, like creating and acting. I didn't invent this. I mean, acting teachers taught me this. So that idea of creating a movie in your head where you sort of hit play on an imaginary scene, I use it all the time in writing. Like certainly in memoir, like I would take myself back to a memory and I would kind of remember. I have in the memoir what I call anchor lines, those things that people say to you that you never forget. Like what Finch said to me, I will never forget it. She said those words, I would bet my life on it. But sometimes you have a memory and you need to jar it. You need to kind of bring it back. You have the memory, but you need to sort of hit play on it to see what did people say? What did the room look like? What was the weather like? So that movie in my head thing is really useful for writing. And now that I'm writing fiction, I use it very much for that. I'll just like put characters in a situation and then hit the play button and they start talking and they start walking down the street and they start having an argument. So that's one thing. The other thing is just you and I, Domenica, have talked about this, the idea of like, I did musical theater for a while and the idea of like musicality, the idea of like refrains that come back or themes that come back and strains of music that come back. I feel like I use that a lot in my writing. The idea that like something that's on page 59, like for example, there's a point in the memoir where my father tries to get my brothers and me to join this thing called Sons of Legionnaires. And we're like, why would we want to go to the American Legion? And I bring that back at the end of the story. So it's just that kind of like weaving those musical themes or lines or phrases through a piece to really give a story like coherence. That's definitely something that I use that I think comes from theater.
Yeah, the musicality is evident all over this book. And I love, I'm gonna steal that. I will give you credit. What was happening right before, to like press play of the scene of what's happening right before. I think that's because then you bring all that energy into the scene rather than, makes it easier and more alive. I think it's great for process and for results. So that's excellent. Thank you for that. All right. We're probably people want to ask you questions. So I'm going to ask one last question and then we'll open it up. After all the work you've done creatively, emotionally, intellectually in writing this book, what do you think now manhood means? Or do you think that we should be asking a completely different question other than, about manhood? What does it mean to you now?
Wow. Honestly, it doesn't mean a lot to me now. I mean, it's something that I think that this story is really about kind of letting that go. I don't, and whenever, I use he, him pronouns, but then when I share that like with my class or with, with anybody else, I sort of, if I have the opportunity, I say, but it's complicated. My relationship to manhood is really complicated because I don't really identify as a man in a way. I mean, I identify as male, but that word has so much baggage for me that I can't embrace it. I can't embrace all the false tropes and what masculinity requires or required of me. I don't want to speak for everybody. I don't speak for everybody in terms of their masculinity, and maybe it really sort of fits a lot of people, but for me, it just was never something that I felt comfortable embracing. I would refer to myself as a guy, and I referred to myself when I was younger as a boy, but then I get to man, and it's just, and maybe it is just the baggage, that that I can't embrace it. So what does it mean now? I think it can mean some really meaningful things to some people. For me, I'm not the authority because it's not probably my word.
Or maybe that's the point, that there isn't an authority on what it means anymore. That's no longer central to the as a concept, that there's an authority on what it means. It could mean many different things to many different people.
Yeah, again, I don't mean to take it away from people for whom it is meaningful. That's not. I'm just saying, for me, it's there were just so much about what that meant that went through my childhood and my young adulthood that I just felt the need to kind of let it go.
Yeah, and moving beyond to something better, where we're not confined by these rules. Right. There's a lot more out there, actually. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My goodness.
I love this book. I could talk about it all night. I'd probably start crying if I did. So maybe we should open it up. There are a lot of people here, and I wonder if we have some questions. If anyone has any questions for Michael about I see one. Is a question from Oblong. What role has reading other people's writing played throughout your life, and what are some books that have really stuck with you?
Wow, love the question. I'm going to go all the way back to that scene in the bar. I think I learned to write from reading the Daily News. I really do. I mean, because you get that sort of journalistic voice that's really, especially in a tabloid like the Daily News. It was just like I was 4, 5, 6 years old, and I would read these articles, and I just internalized a voice. So that's, in a simple sense, reading to learn how to write. In terms of memoir, I got interested in memoir by reading Domenica's book, With or Without You, which is fantastic. By reading The Glass Castle, and just that idea that somebody could take their life or a part of their life and shape it into a story that, again, has those sort of musical threads that run through it. That was really intriguing to me. I read a lot of fiction now. I love Min Jin Lee. She's coming out with a memoir, and I cannot wait. Just I read a lot of contemporary fiction. So yeah, again, Min Jin Lee's Pachinko is just like a standard against which I judge just about every other book I read. I really like Kevin Wilson's stuff. It's kind of fun. He wrote this novel recently called Nothing to See Here, about kids whose pants catch on fire. And it sounds crazy, but it's so tender and beautiful. There's also a memoir that, going back to memoir and things that really have inspired me, Dan Marshall wrote a memoir called Home is Burning, and it is a painful and also like so much humor in it too, in a weird way, about his dad is dying of ALS and his mom is dying of cancer. And he writes this profane, like so foul-mouthed, funny memoir where you're cracking up 1 minute and crying the next. It's really wonderful.
That's so powerful. Now we have a reading list, so you can buy these books from Oblong, everybody. Question from Richard. How do you think your childhood experiences shaped your work in education?
Oh, that's a great question. I heard recently from a student who has read the memoir. He was a student when he was in high school. He's now probably, I guess, in his late 30s. This is in the 90s. And he said, I read the memoir and I realized that you were the teacher to us that you wanted, that you didn't have. And I think that's what got, I think my experience as a student influenced And I had some I had some really wonderful teachers too. My ninth grade English teacher and theater teacher is a wonderful friend to this day. But I also, had people like Mrs. Finch. So I just, I always wanted to be that teacher that, could help make students feel seen and be okay with who they were.
I think you're that teacher probably to a lot of students, more than you even know, is what I would be guessing. A question from Warren. Warren. Hi, Warren.
Hi, Warren.
And for the folks at home, Warren was in the class with Michael and me in 2014, and I remember his work vividly too. Warren asks, you've published several previous books. How does this one fit into your oeuvre?
It's funny because at first glance, you might think it's very different, memoir versus books about youth development and education that are written, for a professional audience. But I wrote those books where I was telling a lot of stories about young people. And I got to the memoir, and as I was writing those, I interview a lot of young people for these other books, and I sort of tell their stories. A couple are about LGBTQ plus youth. One is about youth who are immigrants to the United States. And I just said to myself one day, like, I'm hearing resonances in their stories of my life. I thought I really need to tell my own story. And also a lot of the themes in this book, again, about voice and silencing, and the noise in your head and the relationships that it costs you to have that silence. That's a lot of what I wrote about in those earlier books, profiling young people. So I'm kind of touching on the same themes in the memoir, just by using my own story. So it's very connected.
I'll ask another question. What are you working on now, if you want to share? You mentioned something about when you're writing fiction. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what's next?
Sure. So I've written the first draft of the manuscript that I'm now revising. And it is, I guess you could call it sort of a tragic / comic, sort of like this book has humor in it, but it also has a lot of pathos. The fiction the novel is like that too. And the elevator pitch for it is that it's about a 62-year-old gay man who finds himself unexpectedly single, unexpectedly retired, and unexpectedly the owner of a house in Provincetown, Massachusetts. So it's about him trying to, with this sort of somewhat crazy cast of characters, trying to figure out what his life is going to be in this place where he's, in his 60s and he's gay and there's Provincetown all around him. So that's what I'm working on now. Sounds
great. I know I will be so excited to read that. We have some more questions. Okay. This is from David Gordon. You've written a very important book for the education field, Adolescence at School. Was it scary to cross over to writing about your own life rather than as a researcher? Were you afraid? I think.
Hi, David. So nice of you to come. It wasn't really that scary. I mean, I will go back to Domenica, a conversation that we had, leaving that workshop, which was in the West Village. We were walking down, 10th Street, whatever street it was that school was on, where the workshop was. And I said to you, because your memoir was out, whether it was scary or whether it was, you felt really exposed now when you met people. And I think what you said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you can correct me or talk about it too, but you said no, and actually it's, if anything, it opens people up, because you're telling your story, and we all have stories. We all have those things inside of us that we work so hard not to tell, and we exist in the world and we don't share. And by sharing it, it actually, and I've had that experience with, not that many people have read this yet because it's brand new, but I've had that experience with a few people where, that opens them up to share what's inside of them. I don't know, Domenica, what would you say about that?
That's exactly been my experience where, before the book came out, of course I was terrified. I was terrified. I was like, people are going to look at me like I have 10 heads for the rest of my life. And what, I experienced, what I shared with you, what you've already experienced, and you're going to experience more of it, is in fact, people that I know, people that I've known a long time or thought that I knew, and then perfect strangers over and over again saying, thank you for telling the story I've never been able to tell. Just saying, you told my story. And getting that letters from people, just from people that readers I've never met across the country, and then people that I've known my whole life saying, yeah, me too. And I thought I was the only one, and I thought I was the only one who felt that way. And so it rather than this thing that I thought was going to alienate me from everybody, it just made me more connected to so many people. And I suspect that's going to happen to you a lot in the coming months and years. This is a great question from Joyce. How is this memoir different from what you might have written a decade or more ago? Did you have to be this age to tell this story? I love that question.
I've really got to think about that. Hi, Joyce. I don't know if you're my friend Joyce, but nice to see you. I don't know, to get back to David's question, I don't know if I would have had the courage. I started this in 2014. I kind of felt maybe at that point that I had nothing to lose. I was in a bit of a hiatus in my work from Bard. So I was basically unemployed when I went into your workshop, Domenica. And I was just sort of tried to just put the pedal to the metal and just tell what I wanted to tell. And I didn't care. I don't know if it had been at a different point in my life that I would have been able to do that. I think it came from having read a lot. I just sort of got into reading a lot of memoir. And that also gave me the courage because I got excited about a genre that, frankly, I hadn't read much of before, especially literary memoir. Again, where people sort of take a section of their life and they shape it into a story, the beginning, middle, and end. That really inspired me, and that sort of gave me and just to go back to what you said, Domenica, when I had that experience reading, say, your book, With or Without You, or The Glass Castle, I thought to myself, that's something that I would like to do. I would like to try to find a way to tell my story in a way that other people might read it and feel, maybe, I don't know, like a little less isolated because it speaks to experiences that they've had.
Right. I'm so glad that you were unemployed. Isn't it funny?
It all works out.
it all worked out because it's that feeling of, what do I have to lose? Why not? Right. And sometimes that's what we need in life, as hard as those moments are. We have one last question for the moment from Delia. Can you talk about your experience writing memoir versus fiction? What the process is like, how that's different for you.
Oh, wow. I feel like a lot of it is similar to me. I mean, feels like to me. I've written one memoir and one draft of a novel, so that's the level of my expertise on this. But I feel like a lot of the same principles apply. The sort of the movie in your head, the letting the character speak, the trying to sort of be cinematic about scene and bring the camera in, first like the wide shot where we look at the town, and then the close up where we look at the room, and then the conversation. So a lot of those techniques are similar. With the fiction, I feel like I am, excuse me, I think a lot, and I thought about this with the memoir, I wrote memories for a long, long, long time before I started to see what I thought it meant, what I thought the story was. Vivian Gornick, the memoirist, talks about the situation and the story. It's like I was writing all situation. I was just writing what was happening, but I hadn't really shaped it into a story until I started thinking about these questions of voice and silence and things that were part of my work before that Carol Gilligan, the psychologist, taught me, that have stuck with me for so long. With the fiction, it was more a process of, I almost started with a story and I'm filling in the situation.
Right.
I don't know. What about you, Domenica? What about you?
I would agree. I would say, yeah, with fiction, it starts just with this sort of, with the story, with a character who's doing something, who's saying something. And it's not until later that I figure out, okay, what is this about? Whereas with memoir, I know what it's about, but it's about, how do I take the about and shape it into a moment? So I'd say you captured that really well. I would agree. Yeah. We have one more we have one more question. I think we have time for one more question. Is there a possibility you will write another book about your later life, with Rob, marriage, etc.? This is from Vicky Engstrom. She wants to know: is there a part 2 for your to your memoir?
Well, Rob is my husband. I think he lives in fear that there will be a sequel. Not that he has anything to fear.
It would be called World's Greatest Husband by Michael Sadowski.
Exactly. Right. And if you read the end of this, well, I don't want to say too much, but I don't know. I mean, in some ways, maybe that's getting channeled into fiction. Maybe that's getting channeled into this new novel. And I don't want to say too much about that. But when I think about what this novel is about, at the core, it's a love story. And it's a hard love story. And it's a story about a hard situation that happens. But it's very much a love story. So in some ways, I feel like that is my sequel. Because it is a lot about that. I think a lot about my relationship when I write that. Not that we're those characters, because we're not, and not that we're in that situation, because we're not. But when I go to that what if place that you go to in fiction, that's what I think about. So thank you for your question, Vicky. Thank you for coming.
Great. That's all the questions. I don't know if we have time. Here's Leif.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, I don't know. I could keep talking all night. So I wanted to make room for you.
Well, that's totally up to you. You can banish me. I'm enjoying this. So yeah, but it is about 8 o'clock. This has been amazing. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. You organized this so beautifully, and I'm so grateful. And we didn't have a thunderstorm that knocked out the power, so I'm grateful for that. Domenica, I'm so grateful for your on this. I cannot tell you.
I love this book so much. I'm so happy. This is such a happy day. I mean, we can make this about me. I'm a writer. I'm a narcissist. This is about me. I'm so happy today. This is such a proud day, a happy day for me to be able to celebrate this book that I have loved for 7 years and to see it. So thank you I'm honored to be part of this.
Well, I would not have imagined the launch event with anyone else. No.
Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading. I can't wait to read it in its entirety. And Domenica, thank you for being an amazing host. And any parting words for our audience? You're getting a lot of love in the audience.
Oh.
It's really nice.
Thanks everybody for coming here and listening and just being here. I really appreciate it.
Have a good night, both of you.
Are you able to save the chat, Leif? Because I don't see it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I'd love to see it sometime.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be available.
Thanks,
Definitely.
everybody. Thanks, Leif.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.